Hi, I'm Nickole Tara. I'm a builder of brands and a grower of companies. And as a growth executive, I've been in a lot of boardrooms, in meetings, and leadership sessions where the term flywheel has been utilized. And I've come to appreciate that it perhaps is the buzziest of all corporate buzzwords because, as we'll demonstrate today, I'm not sure how many of us, including myself, knew what it meant. In order to understand what a flywheel is, you first have to understand what it is not. I introduced to you today the pinwheel. The pinwheel is often what a flywheel is depicted as in corporate slides. We've all seen it, right? The circular chart that has a lot of actions around the edges of what companies can do to grow their customer life cycles, new businesses they could start or extensions they could develop that once in place would then put into motion a cycle of growth. And it's really beautiful, right? We've seen these slides and we can all appreciate their wonder. But what does a pinwheel require to move? There's no engine here. There's just my hand. And unfortunately, it will require constant wind because you have to apply energy in order to get motion out of a pinwheel. But what happens when I stop with the energy? The pinwheel stops. And so what will it require as a company in order to get these growth engines to keep going? And we've all been there. It's constant. It's dizzying. It's exhausting. And if we don't pass out from exhaustion or just disdain at the end of the day, our engine is as good as dead because if the engine's not moving, it's not working. So if it's not a pinwheel, it must be a flywheel, right? What's the difference? Wait, what is a flywheel? I have an exercise for you. Get out a pencil and pen. Quickly. Come on, let's go. Draw on a piece of paper what a flywheel looks like. Go on. Is it circular? Does it look like that pinwheel? That's certainly what I would have drawn when I started this examination a couple of months ago. But what I quickly came to learn is that a flywheel is actually borrowed from manufacturing. It's, in essence, a piece of machinery that captures motion in perpetuity. But what does that look like? And how do we create that in the proverbial context in a corporate setting? I introduced to you a model flywheel. This, ladies and gentlemen, is what the flywheel is intended to be. I bet none of you draw that on your pieces of paper, or if you did, you win. But what is this? This is a replica, of course, but it is a little bit more than that pinwheel-like wheel. There's a wheel here, all right, but it seems to have a lot of extra parts. And what does this require? How does it get started? How do we move that engine forward? I can tell you that it's not simplistic in terms of its requirements. First and foremost, it requires fuel. It requires flame. And it requires patience. So if the flywheel represents our engine of growth, and this wheel represents the perpetual motion that we want to put ourselves in as a company so that we can get to a place of unparalleled and transformational growth, how do we get that engine started, right? And what is this fuel as an analogy? This fuel, I believe, is our ideas. It's our personnel, it's our talent, it's our processes, right? It's what makes us unique as a company, or it's what the innovation will require in terms of a growth engine. But how do we get this started? It's just sitting here, sedentary, looking at us, being very intriguing, but really not impacting our company life cycle. And that's where we need ignition. And so when we get into this process as a company, we need a group or a person or a team to provide the necessary fuel and to have the notionality of lighting the flame. And lighting the flame happens at companies. I've been there. You've been there too. When there's a really motivated group or a really interesting product or team that emerges and they say, we can do this. We can innovate. We can be best in class. We can lead. And they light a flame. And they have amazing ideas, right? So the flame's burning very hot, very consistently. But in this context, the growth engine is still stagnant. Because what true growth requires is a pressure to build. And so what this engine is doing right now is heating this bulb right here. And there's a pressure that's building within the engine. And like any great pressure, it doesn't happen quickly, overnight, perhaps even with weeks or months of continued and sustained effort. And this period at a company can be difficult. And I argue that this is the part in companies' life cycles where a lot of people give up because it doesn't seem like anything's happening right now. It seems like there's really smart people working on really smart subject matter or projects or initiatives, and lots of effort has been put into it. And the ideas have been ignited, but there's no motion. And so this is where I think most people to blame are corporate boards and executive teams who don't let their projects and their teams have ignition for long enough. Because if you truly let your smartest, brightest bulbs work on innovation and you give them the tools they need and you're patient, that is when the magic happens. This is a flywheel. What happens when I snuff out the flame? Flywheel keeps working for a while. Notice that? It starts to slow. And eventually, it stops, but it's not immediate. And I think that's the secondary cautionary tale for executive teams and management, is that once we have a flywheel in motion, keep it in motion. Keep the flame burning. Keep the ideas and the fuel high. Keep the talent pool on task. Continue to be patient for new ideas. Because the moment we rest on our laurels and we don't give the company the fuel that it needs, the flame snuffs out and the engine stops. The final part of this that I think is the most invaluable lesson and needs to be underscored is that the flywheel at a company isn't one person. It's not one team. It's not even a department. The flywheel is an ideal. It's a value. It's a cultural commitment that we make to each other to innovate, to push ourselves, to be transformative. And certainly the culture is curated from the top down, but the flywheel mentality comes from the bottom up, comes from the inside out, comes from the outside in. It's all encompassing if it's done correctly. And I think it's really powerful because you as a person, you as a worker, you as a human being, you can exhibit flywheel style behavior in your day-to-day and you can impact for the better, no matter where you are in the organization, no matter where you are as a team. But for those of us in leadership, this is paramount to being successful. And the quicker we can learn how to embody flywheel mentality into our day-to-day, the better we're going to be. Certainly the more transformational and certainly the more long-term impactful for our community and our world.